we will get started here. Om. 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 Om Sahana Bhavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Parthaya Pratibodhitam Bhagavata Narayanena Swayam Vyasena Kratitam Purana Munina Madhye Mahabharatam Advaitam Vridavarshinim Bhagavatim Ashtadashadhyayinim Ambatvam Anusandadhami Bhagavad Gita Bhavatveshini. Namostute Vyasa Vishana Buddhe Fulla Ravindayata Patra Netra Yena Tvaya Bharata Taila Purnaha Prajvalito Jnanamaya Pradeepaha Prapanna Parijataya Totra Vetraikapanaye Jnanamudraya Krishnaya Geetam Vrudatuhe Namaha. Sarvadharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja Aham Tva Sarva Papebhyaha Mokshayishyami Ma Shuchaha. So, we are now seeing in the second chapter where Lord Krishna, after describing the nature of the self and very clearly indicating to Arjuna the reason why he's really going through all this trauma and sorrow. The reason for that is, of course, that he's completely ignorant of really what his true nature is. So from that point, Lord Krishna basically takes him to the standpoint from a worldly standpoint and then from a dharmic standpoint about how he definitely needs to fight. He tries to convince him with many such arguments saying that, he is the luckiest of people to have gotten this great opportunity to fight. And we know that Arjuna never really thought that way, right? But here Lord Krishna starts with convincing him about how fortunate he was, and then telling him that it was the best opportunity that he could have ever got, because this particular duty that he has to do is for a very, very good cause. And then he tells him about how this war has just fallen into his lap and how it is in line with exactly what his duty is. All this we saw in order to make Arjuna make up his mind to get up and fight the war. So today in reflection time, we are not dealing with any of the things that we talked about, but we are going to be reflecting upon some of the questions on karma. Because after Lord Krishna, convinces Arjuna to fight the war from a dharmic standpoint, he finally tells him, Arjuna, don't you think you want to be happy? And don't we all? Everything that we do is only for happiness. And this happiness is also equal to the peace which a mind wants in everything. So we saw this shloka of Sukha Dukhe Same Kritva. And for this one, it is the beginning on how Lord Krishna is trying to explain to this dynamic man of action about the karma aspect. And so we're going to be spending a lot of time in karma today. But as always, it's good to reflect upon karma through some of these questions. So let us see what they are. So in the shloka that I just mentioned, what are the three pairs of opposites that Lord Krishna is asking Arjuna to rise above? Now, this is an important aspect because we go through this all the time. And if we can just nail down exactly what these three pairs of opposites are and what we need to have, then we are golden. We can actually, rise above anything. So any thoughts on what are the three pairs of opposites that Lord Krishna is asking Arjuna?
Sukh-dukh.
Sukha-dukh, very good. Very
Pleasure
good.
and pain.
Pleasure and pain, yes. Anything else?
Likes and dislikes.
Likes and dislikes, although they are pairs of opposites. And yes, Lord Krishna wants Arjuna to rise above it. But in this particular shloka, which I just mentioned, the others are gain and loss.
Victory and defeat.
Victory and defeat, exactly. So, sukha, dukkha, same kritva, labha, alabha, and jaya and ajaya, right? Now, why is this sort of important for us? Of course, Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna here, but it is very important for us also in what we go through in life, right? As Amma said, pleasure and pain, joy and sorrow is what we constantly go through in our lives. Either our life is, again, sorry, this is my thing is, it tends to freeze. I hope you can hear me. You can hear me, right?
Okay. Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. My Zoom has to just wait for some time. You can still hear me?
Yes, we can
Okay.
hear this. We can see the screen.
Okay, very good, very good. The Zoom, it's for me, but if you can hear it, this is good. So the three pairs we discussed. So what is the attitude, what Lord Krishna wants us to have? What is the attitude that Lord Krishna wants us to have?
Do our duty.
Be in sattva.
Be in sattva, it is coming to that. But as far as this shloka is concerned,
Be from anxiety, free from anxiety.
Be free from anxieties. Yeah, there is correct. Free from anxieties, which also would indicate that be in equipoise. Be totally unaffected by all those things which is mentioned above. So this is what he wanted us to know in this shloka. Sukha dukkhe same kritva labha labha jaya jaya. So these are the three pairs of opposites which is mentioned in the first line. And same kritva, samam. So be equal-minded. Even if somebody comes and gives you a lottery of $1 million, of course you should be happy about it, but we doesn't have to be overly excited, because $1 million may come in today, but tomorrow somebody may take it away, right? So, same kritva is the key phrase here. and something that we can also use in our own lives, because we go through joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain, and then gain and loss in different ways, whether it's the affection of people, whether it is labha, gain again, whether it's a stock market thing, but even a health, we may one day gain a lot of energy. Some days we may not feel very energetic. Then Jaya again is defeat and victory. Sometimes we may be victorious in whether it's our projects, whether it is different things. But in all this, try to be calm. So when we do that, tato yuddhaya yujyasva. So again, life being a battle, in all these things, maintain that firmness and do our duty. And if we do this, there is no way that we would incur any kind of sin. Here it says sin, but basically it means that we won't suffer for any of this in the future. So we saw this, and then shlokas 39 to 41, we saw about the how this Sankhya Yoga, which is basically this knowledge of the self, how can we translate that into Karma Yoga? And Lord Krishna tells Arjuna that, as far as all the actions that you're doing, of course, you have to put a lot of effort, no question. And of course, you have to put it in, certain sequence, etc. And then, of course, it will all take a lot of time. But among the most important of all these things, as far as Karma Yoga is concerned, he tells him that he needs to have the right attitude. So Karma Yoga is all about having the right attitude in anything and everything what we need to take. And this attitude, which is what is mentioned in the previous shloka, which is the attitude of I am focusing only on my action, and I'm not going to be focused on what is going to come forward and what has happened in the past, and I will just do that. So he tells this. And next he tells him that if he maintains his Karma Yoga attitude, then he can rest assured that his mind will become very clear. And when it is very clear, you have the clarity of vision. So this purified mind is very essential, because with that clarity, we can actually have the ability to distinguish between so many different things, like the right versus wrong, real versus unreal, temporary versus permanent. All these things can happen only when a mind is very pure. And that purity can be obtained only through Karma Yoga. So he says this is very important. And once we have the purity of knowledge, then the Jnana Yoga will be much more easier. So this is the reason why Karma Yoga was needed. And here he says about the Vyavasayatmika Buddhihi. He talks about that. And he talks about that as the single most important thing through Karma Yoga, which is obtained, which is the conviction of the intellect. So we saw these three shlokas in this case, which is Esha te bihita sankhe buddhi yoge tvimam shunu buddhya yukto yaya partha karma bandham prahasyasi. So we saw that. Then neha bikramana shosti pratyavayo na vidyate swalpamasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. We saw this also. And then we saw Vyavasayatmika buddhihi ekeha kuru nandana bahushaka hyanantascha buddhayo vyavasayinam. So we saw these three shlokas, which basically in a nutshell talks about how the purity of mind leads to a clarity of vision, and this clarity of vision leads to this one single pointed focus, which is this Vyavasayatmika buddhi. And then he talks about how that people who do not have Vyavasayatmika buddhi, what hi anantascha. People who have, many branched thoughts, whose thoughts are all over. They are the ones who are very, who are always flipping from one thing to another, who may not do their job extremely well. So all this was pointed out in all these three shlokas. So this is what we saw, the difference between the individuals, which is a karma yogi is focused and is convinced about the person's goal, whereas a non-karma yogi, that is a person who is basically one who is not sold onto karma yoga, for example, or maybe who has not even come in contact with this information, such a person is unfocused. So the person who is a karma yogi is actually, he has what we call as the faith in the Shastras. He has faith in Bhagavad Gita. He has faith in what the Vedas are saying. So what we call this is pramanam. Pramanam means the aspect of the knowledge. Pramanam is the means of knowledge. And here Vedas are the means of knowledge. So such a person has a pramana janita viveka buddhi. Such a person knows very clearly where his goal is. And the goal for all of us, whether it is a spiritual goal or whether it is a material goal, it is, of course, happiness. But such a person knows, that is a karma yogi, knows very clearly where to seek that happiness. He knows, or he or she knows, that this happiness is in me. And such a person also, because he has such a clarity of vision, he recognizes that if his mind is impure, then that impure mind, he cannot experience that joy. So such a person will automatically know what needs to be done in terms of correction, etc. Whereas a non-karma yogi who has a very unfocused mind, a disturbed mind, such a person tends to project the happiness outside. What do we mean by that? Tends to project. So such a person gains happiness or satisfaction by indulging in the objects outside and in the relationships. And when that person is constantly looking for this happiness outside, guess what? Such a person will never be able to make good decisions, be very clear in how he wants to move forward, because his happiness is dependent on so many factors outside. And therefore, it is very hard for such a person to find a constant stream of joy in whatever he's trying to do. So in shlokas 42 to 44, we saw last time, and we'll probably go through it again, is a description of a person who does not have this single pointed resolve or single pointed attention, or who doesn't have the clarity. Such a person is constantly looking for many sources of happiness outside. So it's like this bahu shakha anantascha, bahu meaning many, many branches. I hope you like this thing here, which is many branches, each branch, looking out for some joy or the other. So I'm calling this as a wish-fulfilling tree. So a person who doesn't have the knowledge of Bhagavad Gita, who doesn't have the knowledge of really the spirituality, such a person is going to have his hands pretty full. In fact, you can see the number of hands here, constantly bouncing one thing or the other. And whether it is name, fame, wealth, property, relationships, such a person is constantly outside looking for all this. It's, and again, all these are just finite, right? And so this person will have multiple thoughts, and these people are constantly looking for different things. And that is what we call as this bahushakha anantascha. mind going all over. And so what is the condition of such a person? The condition of the person whose mind is only outside, looking for happiness outside, is like this person who is looking into a mirror at the face and looking to see if he can correct his face in the mirror. Okay, so because a person is constantly looking for something outside, such a person is, compared to this person who is looking at the reflection in the mirror and trying to correct something in the mirror, but not necessarily recognizing that the problem is not in the mirror, not in the reflection, but is actually in the person itself. So the correction obviously is in the mind, in our own minds, not outside. And so this shloka again is trying to show how this is an important thing to remember, that when we are looking for happiness, when we look outside constantly, and when we are not happy with something and we're looking outside, it is like this example of somebody looking at the mirror, whereas the problem is actually within us, and that is where we need to look at how to solve the issue. So the shlokas we saw was Yam imam pushpitam vacham pravadantya vipaschitaha vedavadaratav partha nanyadastiti vadinaha. So the person who is looking outside for happiness, that person is trying to convince other people, saying that come, Vedas are telling us that be happy, don't worry, be happy, be merry, enjoy. The life is for enjoyment. We have given only one birth, so let's just go out and make the maximum out of it, enjoy it. And such a person says that is what is written in the Vedas, and he uses such beautiful words which can convince anybody. So, but they are basically words which are not really understood very well. So that is what was said. And then we saw Kamat Manaha Swargaparaha Janma Karma Falapradam Kriya Vishesha Bahulam Bhogaishwarya Yagatim Prati. So such a person is saying that, okay, you can have lots of desires. And when you have these desires, you can have heaven as your goal. And once you have that, you can, just work only for that, to get that as a goal. And of course, to get heaven is not easy. So such a person continuously takes birth all the time. So janma karma phala pradam. So they pursue the rewards of their action. Again, the words have been very clearly, very carefully chosen here, saying that such a person is always doing an action, keeping in mind what is in it for them. That's the only way they do it. And when they do such a thing, that leads to constant janma, one after the other, because in one janma, it is impossible to satisfy all the desires. So they continuously keep moving to get this. So, and there, here they're saying that the source of happiness is only by doing these actions. So such a person, again, continuously, what they do is Bhoga Aishwarya Prasaktanam Taya Pahrita Chetasam Vyavasayatmika Buddhihi Samadho Na Vidhiyate. So how can this person ever then get that single-pointed vision or single-pointed clarity of the mind? Because the mind is so scattered. Like the tree which I showed, the mind is totally scattered, looking for all this happiness in different places. So such a person doesn't have any of this. So therefore, Lord Krishna tells Arjuna that think through this very carefully and what you should really do. So we will see that. But before that, I wanted to address a question that Meena Shankar put forth after the last week's discussion, which I thought was very pertinent to be discussed today. So the question that was asked is, what are really the Vedas? And what is really Karma Kanda? And in that same context, because what are the three gunas, and especially Sattva? So let us see this particular, these two questions and see how it relates to the shlokas that we talked about. Because in the last three shlokas, it was mentioned about this person saying that, look at the Vedas. Vedas are telling you that. And because the shlokas are so brief, we have to interpret that it is not as if the entire Vedas are saying that, but it is a karma kanda. So let us see what are the Vedas and how we can tie the three gunas to. So the Vedas for us, for Hindus, is essentially a large body, you can say, of a lot of religious texts. Now, these were composed in Vedic Sanskrit, and still we have all these, you can actually, these Vedas you can see in many of the oldest museums or in places of ashrams. You can see these Vedas which are shown here, those Vedas. So in Sandipani, for example, we had the Vedas also there, which we could actually see there and really understand, wow. So the Vedas is not something which, are just something which we hear about, but they are actual books. The word Veda itself, it comes from a Sanskrit dhatu, or the root, which is called vid. And vid basically means to know. The verb vid means to know. And the Vedas, so it basically means it's translated as a treasure of knowledge or as the source or the means of knowledge. Now, the next question that might potentially come about is, who wrote the Vedas? So here, the way our wonderful Hindu system is, nobody ever claims that I wrote a particular Veda. In fact, it was sage Veda Vyasa who actually compiled all these Vedas together. And of course, that will be a topic for another discussion at some point. But the Vedas are called as Apaurushaya Jnanam. So Paurusheya means that which is written by a Purusha. Purusha means a human, man, human, you can say that. But Apaurushaya means it is not of human origin. So what does that necessarily mean? It basically means that when the rishis were in the highest state of meditation, these Vedas were revealed to them. And that is why we call this as not actually written down by somebody. So since it is revealed, it is also called as Shruti. Shruti. So Shruti means that which has been heard. Whereas the one which after somebody hears something and you actually write it down, translate it, or then you remember it and then write it down, that is called as Smriti. So Vedas are Shruti, and Vedas were revealed to the rishis of ancient India, who had the mind so pure. They were so pure with absolutely no desires. So they were literally in tune with the entire nature. So they heard these sounds, and these sounds were then interpreted, were then codified and written down. So Dr. Radhakrishnan, who was the president of India, who was the president of India, he says that the Vedas are the earliest documents of the human mind that we possess. Literally, they are one of the oldest scriptures, oldest things that a human mind could have interpreted and written. So that's the greatness of the Vedas, which from where we are studying Bhagavad Gita. So just a little more information about Vedas. Vedas are 4 in Vedas. There are 4 Vedas: the Rig Veda, Yajur Veda, Sama Veda, and Atharvana Veda or Atharva Veda. And each of these Vedas are divided into 3 or 4 divisions, depending on how you look at it. The divisions are Samhitas, which contains a lot of mantras and benedictions. The Aranyakas are basically, they are text on rituals and ceremonies. And those days, a lot of the rituals which were done involved sacrifices also. So it contains all the information on how these things are to be done, Aranyakas. And the Brahmanas are also something which are commentaries on rituals and other different kinds of ceremonies. And finally, you have the section on Upanishads. So the Upanishads are called the Veda Anta, or the end of the Vedas. But that doesn't mean that in every Veda, after you finish the whole thing, at the end portion is called the Upanishads. That's not how you interpret Vedanta. But basically, Vedanta means after you are done with these 3 portions of the Vedas, then you come to Upanishads. So these Upanishads sometimes are in the middle of the Vedas also. So for example, we have Ishavasya Upanishad, which is in the middle of it. And so there are different sections of the Vedas themselves. So Vedas are, that's what Vedas are. So you have the different sections. You have 4 important Vedas. And each one of us, we basically, our lineage goes to coming to each one of these Vedas. Some of us belong to Yajur Veda, some to Sama Veda, Rig Veda, etc. And for ease of convenience for us, I want to also mention this, is that among these 4, you have basically the 1, 2, and 3, they belong to the Karma Kanda, because you have a lot of action involved, correct? Where you're doing something in order to, get to the next level of evolution. And that is what is shown in the next slide here. Here we have, so Vedas, the Purva Mimamsa. Purva means before, Uttara means afterwards. So Purva Mimamsa, has all these, the Aranyakas, etc., Samhitas, etc. Uttara Mimamsa basically has only the knowledge of Atma. And this is where Vedantic knowledge, or Jnana Kanda it's also called, and also called as Upanishads. And so this is the way you can look at it. Now, what are the benefits from each one of them? When you are in the stage of Karma Kanda, so each one of us are at different levels of evolution. And for those of us who still believe that happiness is outside, and we are trying to do a lot of actions to get that, we are still in the Karma Kanda portion. So when you do Karma Kanda, the benefit of doing the actions well will take you to what we call as Pitraloka. And at some point, we will also discuss the 14 lokas. But Pitraloka is about the Bhumi Loka, where we are about this. And that is Pitraloka. And when you do a lot of Upasana Kanda, which is, again, some people would consider this as part of Karma Kanda, maybe some people may consider a separate section here. Upasana Kanda takes you to Devaloka. So Devaloka, which is higher than the Pitraloka. And Upasana Kanda is basically that section which involves a lot of, focusing upon nature, focusing upon the gods, basically a lot of devotion to the various gods. So all that is Upasana Kanda. And so that takes you to Devaloka. Whereas Jnana Kanda, or the study of the Upanishads, takes you to removing the ignorance about who we are. If you remember, we said we are none other than Atma. For example, if I consider myself all the time as I'm Sunitha, 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 and I'm always looking at what is in it for me, then I'm in Ajnanam, or ignorance. So, but by study of the Jnana Kanda, for which I need to purify myself through Karma Kanda and Upasana Kanda, then that leads to removal, nivritti, removal of the Ajnana or ignorance. So that's the whole idea of the Vedas. And this is just to give you in a pictorial form how the Rig, Yajur, Sama, Atharva Veda. And in here, these are the Upanishads, the Jnana Kanda portion, where you have the Aitareya Upanishad belonging to Rig Veda, and then you have the Katha Upanishad and Taittiriya Upanishad belonging to this Krishna Yajurveda. And Shukla Yajurveda, you have the Ishavasya Upanishad and Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. And Sama Veda, you have the Chandogya Upanishad and Katha Upanishad. And then you have Atharvana Veda, and this you have the Prashna Upanishad, Mundaka Upanishad, and Mandukya Upanishad. So these are the 10 most important Upanishads for which Bhagavan Adi Shankaracharya has written the Bhashya for it. And that is why they're called the 10 main Upanishads. So this gives you a pictorial form of the Vedas and how their Upanishads are related. So wanted to throw this as something for Vedas. And now let us talk about how this is connected to the Gunas. So since we explained that in the Vedas you have the Karma Kanda and then you have the Jnana Kanda. Now in this set of shlokas that we saw, and especially the 45th shloka that we will see, which says Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha, and even the previous shloka which talked about the Bhoga Aishwarya and etc. So basically 90% of the Vedas are almost, you would say that, is actually this Karma Kanda portion. And this Karma Kanda portion is there because of the fact that we have the Karma Kanda portion is there because as beings, not only as beings, but even as nature and everything, which in 3rd chapter, we will be talking more about how nature itself is also made of all these gunas. But since we are discussing today about a person whose mind is scattered and who's unfocused, etc., right? So such a person, in the Karma Kanda portion, there is a lot of information about how the person can evolve, because a person's thoughts are in so many different ways. Now, in order to classify those thoughts, there is we have this thing called the gunas. Our thoughts can be classified into these 3 kind of things, which are called as gunas, which is sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay. So in this sattva, rajas, tamas, let us see what are the qualities. They are basically, like I said, all of us, our thoughts, which is there in our mind. Our mind is nothing but a flow of thoughts. And this flow of thoughts is basically a combination of these 3 gunas. And you can see the colors really also represents that. Sattva means pure. Sattva is purity. The thoughts are very pure and noble. And then you have the rajas, or tamas here. Tamas is thoughts of inertia, laziness, when my thoughts are very dull and inactive. Those are tamasic thoughts. And then we have the rajasic thoughts. Rajasic thoughts are those thoughts which are filled with passion and ambition. So all of us basically are nothing but a combination of all these thoughts. And in the Karma Kanda portion, you have, or is basically meant for all of us whose thoughts are so full of these desires for different things. And it gives you really a lot of tips on how you can start to purify the thoughts. So, for example, if I have a lot of very, inertia kind of thoughts, I'm very lazy, I don't want to get up, those kind of things, then in Karma Kanda, you have some rituals which tells you that, hey, if you do this, guess what? You're going to get this wonderful gift. And who wouldn't want that, right? So in a sense, then it pushes you to bring more rajas into your life. And then for somebody who is very rajasic, who is constantly doing things for himself or herself, then, and at one point, if this person were to sit down and reflect as to why am I doing all this? Why am I getting stressed out? And slowly you start to think about, well, I don't have to necessarily go outside for happiness. I can actually look within myself. And so therefore, that person starts to develop more amount of sattva. And the person recognizes, where really happiness is. And slowly the person gravitates towards God and, starts to purify the mind through various activities, spiritual activities like going to the temple, chanting, doing japa, doing meditation and everything. And by doing so, the thoughts become more and more pure. And that allows that person to slowly understand or make the mind prepared or ready to receive the knowledge of the Jnana Kanda. So that is the essence of why these gunas were mentioned in these shlokas. And this is what we saw here, which is Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha. So that is why he's saying the Vedas deal with the three gunas. Traigunya Vishaya, the content of the Vedas are basically these three gunas. And these are essentially, when they say Vedas here, it is dealing with the Karma Kanda portion. So Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha, Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna. So Lord Krishna is telling Arjuna now. Earlier he talked about asking him to be above the pair of opposites. But now he's saying, try to be above the gunas even. So again, this portion of the second chapter, which is focusing a lot on the Jnana Kanda portion, he's trying to remind Arjuna, be above these gunas. And then be also above the pairs of opposites, which we saw before. Sukha dukhe same kritva labha labho jaya jayo. Matra sparshasta kaunteya shitoshna sukha dukkha daha. Agama payino nityaha tam stitikshasva bharata. So those shlokas. So he tells them, and then also be above the, free yourself from the anxieties. So we saw briefly this last time. Now let's focus a little more on the different qualities. So first, in this shloka, we have where Lord Krishna is asking Arjuna, Atmavan Bhava. He's trying to tell him that, if you remember again, the whole idea is about happiness. And Lord Krishna is reminding Arjuna that Atma, which is in you, or which is you, actually, which is you, is actually pure happiness. So if that is pure happiness, why are you going out? So if you remember, Arjuna wanted to basically see how he could defeat them also, and try to, towards the end, there was this one feeling for him that, if I defeat them, maybe I could be happy, or if I don't defeat them, I would be happy. So Lord Krishna is reminding Arjuna that you are happiness, Atmavan Bhava. So if you are happiness, then why would you want to go anywhere else? Then Nistray Gunyo Bhava, again reminding him that, try to be above those three gunas. Again, Lord Krishna is, giving him literally a PhD kind of goal here. Arjuna is still so sorrowful here, but Lord Krishna is trying to tell him, the only way you're going to be completely happy is when you are above all these three gunas. So when we talked about the three gunas, for example, sometimes, just laying in a couch gives you happiness, and that is tamasic kind of happiness. Or if you want to go out there, compete with everyone and win something, that's a Rajasik kind of happiness. And Sattvic kind of happiness is when I'm very happy just being in the presence of the Lord, or even when I'm in meditation and I get a lot of happiness, that is Sattvic happiness. So, of course, we all have to aspire for the Sattvic kind of happiness, but Lord Krishna is in this section here, he's trying to say, try to go even beyond the Sattvic kind of happiness. And that is the Nistre Gunyo Bhava, he's telling Arjuna. And then Nirdvandvo Bhava, we already talked about it last time, where try to be above the pairs of opposites. And then Nitya Sattvasto Bhava, try to keep the mind always pure. Try to be in that state of Sattvic state, because it's in the Sattvic state that we are always at our best. When we are in the Rajasic state, for example, where again, I'm looking at constantly as what is in it for me, then I'm in a state of always a kind of a perpetual delusion. So here he's trying to tell him, be in Sattva. So Nitya Sattvasto Bhava, when we do that devotion, our mind is, automatically gravitates towards God, and things happen. We don't get upset by the ups and downs also. So last one in this list is Nir-Yoga Kshemo Bhava. I mentioned last time we didn't have time to discuss this, so I want to spend a little time to discuss Nir-Yoga Kshemo Bhava. So what does that mean? He's trying to say, he's trying to remind Arjuna that try to do your work, but leave the aspect of yoga and kshema to me. So Lord Krishna is, basically telling Arjuna, you don't have to worry about any of this. So what is yoga and what is kshema? So yoga is that aspect of, in here, yoga basically means trying to get something what you don't have. So trying to get something what you don't have is called yoga, and kshema is to preserve what you got. That is kshema. So yoga means trying to get what you don't have, and kshema is trying to preserve what you have, what you got, what you already have. For example, in our own lives, I purchase a house, and that's my yoga here, and kshema is maintaining the house. Now, what Lord Krishna is telling is, in anything and everything, whatever you're getting and whatever you're trying to maintain, don't get stressed out. Don't get stressed out thinking, oh my God, I have to make sure my house is to be clean, make sure that, or constantly maintaining this, or being worried or anxious in the process of doing these two things. That is what he's trying to say, is that leave any kind of anxiety or worry to me. Just surrender yourself completely to me. I will take care of you. So just have complete faith and live your life that way. So that is Yoga Kshema. So, but you know how it is. Today we worry about so many things. And today COVID, for example, is the biggest thing which is bothering us at this time. So even in this situation, what the Lord is saying is, you do what you have to do, which is you mask up, you do all the things that is needed, still maintain your 6 feet distance, Yes, even though we are vaccinated today, we still don't know whom we are coming in contact with. So until everybody is vaccinated, to a large extent, we still have to follow certain guidelines. And that is the aspect that we need to do. And what Lord Krishna is reminding us that he will take care of whatever needs to be done in the bigger picture. So that is Yogakshema. So having the faith, surrendering to the Lord, is doing this Nir Yogakshemo Bhava. That is the aspect that was mentioned in this shloka of 45. So in that sense, this shloka is a very beautiful shloka. I will just chant that one more time. Traigunya Vishaya Vedaha Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna Nirdvandvo Nitya Sattvastaha Niryogakshema Atmavan. So you have all these 5 things mentioned here. And here in the first shloka, he's trying to remind Arjuna that as long as you're in Karma Kanda, first try to evolve from where you are, try to get into that sattvic state. And when you're there, try to follow all these other sadhanas. So having done this, now we have Lord Krishna trying to bring about again what the difference, how, how does a person who has reached that state, who is above the Nistre Gunyo and then the Nirdvandvo, who is a Nirdvandvo, who is a Nistre Gunyo, and who is Nir Yogakshema. What is really the quality of such a person? And what is the difference between somebody who is not there versus somebody who's already there? So the shloka is Yavanartha Udapane Yavanartha Udapane Sarvata Samplutodake Sarvata Samplutodake Tavan Sarveshu Vedeshu Tavan Sarveshu Vedeshu Brahmanasya Vijanataha Brahmanasya Vijanataha. So what he's saying here is, once a person has reached that level, for that person, the Vedas is not of much use. So again, I repeat, for a person who has reached that state where nothing bothers that person, and the person is in complete control of her or his gunas, for such a person, the person has risen above. The Vedas themselves doesn't help a lot. And how is that? He's giving a beautiful example to show that. So he says, Yavan Artha Udapani, as much as a reservoir is in a place where there's a flood everywhere, so much use are all the Vedas to that person who is a knower of Brahman. Brahmanam, Brahmanasya Vijanataha. Vijanataha, one who is a knower of Brahman, who's flooded by the self, who's flooded by the self. Isn't that beautiful? I mean, the person who is above all this completely recognizes his nature as that absolute Brahman. And the person is so full of Brahman, I mean, who is so much this one, for that person, the Vedas is not needed. So that is what he's trying to show here. So I just have this example of this reservoir and this flood of water. For somebody who is looking to, get some water, if his house is flooded, if there's a whole big flood in the village or something like that, why would such a person go to the village well to get a pot of water? right? I know one may say that, well, this water is muddy and everything, but take it for the example what it is, which is a person, when there's flood in the village, there is no need to go to the well to get water. So too, what he's trying to say is this Mahatma, for this Mahatma, he is so filled with happiness coming out of his own self. Okay. So the comparison here is the water is compared to the happiness here. So for a Mahatma, that happiness that he's experiencing is coming out of his own self, and it is so overflowing that such a person, why would he go outside to get happiness from objects or relationships or anything? Such a person has recognized that he himself or she himself is that happiness. So that's the example here. But let's look at it from our perspective. Why, we look outside for happiness. Now, what is the problem with looking for that happiness in doing this? Well, first of all, the problem for looking at happiness there is anything and everything, whether it's clothing, whether it is food, whether it is this one, so long as we are doing it for a maintenance of our body, that is fine. But if I'm looking for happiness outside, in the outside objects, then I better recognize that happiness is very finite. It's limited. It comes in small packets. You enjoy it, and then you're already looking for something else, right? So that is one problem for us when we're looking for happiness outside. Second thing is that happiness is uncertain. I have no idea whether I will, get the same thing again. Of course, we may say, well, that's not true. I mean, if I go to Costco and I'm always used to buying this particular snack at Costco, I know that Costco will carry and I can go there, right? But even there is an uncertainty. I mean, Costco doesn't carry all the things all the time, right? So it is uncertain. Second thing is, whatever we want is subject to an external competition. Again, it depends on what I need, depending on every individual's desire can be different. So we find that it is, whatever I want, others also need the same thing. So in that sense, this is subject to external competition. So looking for happiness outside has all these problems, which I need to recognize. On the other hand, the picture that I showed about this Mahatma, he readily finds that happiness within himself. He is so content in where he is, or where he or she is, recognizes that he or she is that happiness, so doesn't have to go through all these problems that we go through. So that's what the shloka is again reminding us on how looking outside for happiness is not the right thing. So having described so much, next week, I think we are all set for starting this most famous shloka of Bhagavad Gita, which is Karmanye Vadhikaraste Ma Phaleshu Kadachana Ma Karma Phala Hetur Bhuhu Ma Te Sangostva Karmani. Very, very important shloka. Lot of things that we can learn from this again on how to incorporate the Bhagavad Gita in our lives from the Karma Yoga standpoint, because at the end of the day, we are all Karma Yogis. We are still acting in this world outside, and whatever we do, we're looking for happiness there. So we will try to understand this philosophy behind Karma Yoga, which will help us, give us that Vyavasayatmika Buddhi, the single-pointed conviction. And we know that we need that in order to develop the purity of mind. So with that, I think the time is 9:30, and I will stop here, and we will continue next week. I think our next thing will be on next week, 5/26. Sarve bhavantu sukhinah, sarve santu niramayaha, sarve bhadrani pashyantu, ma kaschit dukkha bhag bhavet. Om shanti shanti shanti. Om purnamadah purnamidam purnat purnamudachyate. Purnasya purnamadaya purnameva vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.